Yeah, so if we imagine a scenario whereby you've successfully purchased a home, but you've got big plans, you surround yourself with a team that invests in real estate and looks at real estate as a way to grow wealth. What are you going to do with it, Neal?
You're going to burr it, obviously.
Just burr it, bruh.
Everyone burrs it. That's what they do.
They need to add an O at the end, like optimize or option.
Bro.
Yeah, just call it bro. Might as well.
Yeah, so this is, I think, more for the investor on average. I wouldn't say it's someone that's just buying a normal home, especially because one of the R's is rent. So, but yeah, this is the Brrrr method, which has come up a lot. I don't know what investor really first started using it, but one of the social media gurus kind of, I think, created this. I'm going to go over a quick thing for the buy. It's a little bit different than what kind of Chandler went over, because again, this is for an investor. So everything he said still applies. But if you're buying a rental property, there's going to be a few more due diligence items that you might want to go over. For example, if it's a house that's been converted into multiple units, you want to try and get a confirmation that it's a legal multi-unit house. Because a lot of people will convert homes without getting the permits and going through those steps, which could screw you down the road. Because if you go to do work to it and the city comes in and says, hey, look, this isn't actually a legal 3-unit, you could have to revert to a single family home. Yeah,
which obviously also affects the value. And with the Brrrr method, part of your due diligence early on and part of your data collection is about what is it going to be worth when I'm done.
Exactly.
Right? Like that's the whole process.
Exactly. And so that's what I said. The most important part is this buy. And I say in that, you need to be able to identify if the next 3 R's are going to work.
Yeah.
That's what you're doing in this step. So typically in this, I mean, you get better as time goes on. It's a little bit difficult at first. And I find it's almost even more difficult on some of the smaller properties because it's based on comparables, which in a lot of markets, some people don't have. It's exciting now because it's very easy to get comparables because the amount of transactions that are taking place and the dollar values that they're happening at, you can almost always find a comparable that's worth more.
And to be clear to people, like a comparable is a sale nearby that validates or supports or determines in some cases the value of your subject property. So I think my home here can be worth this because the comparable home down the street sold for that. So that's what a comparable is.
Exactly. And so, yeah, so that's a big one. And in the buy, for me, most of the time I'm looking for, okay, so if this is what I'm buying this at, the rents are below market, it's this many units, you want to make sure that there's a comparable at that higher end value that you're looking for out of this. And you want to factor in your cost to get there. Right? So even though you might be buying a duplex for $300 and the neighbor sold for $400, like I'm getting the best deal ever. It takes you $150,000 to make it look like your neighbor's. You're not. You're actually paying $50,000 more than your neighbor did. So it's being able to kind of address those items. There's so much in the buy. The buy is such an important part.
The buy is everything.
The buy is absolutely everything. Like you can't win in this game if you're making bad buys or if you're overpaying.
If you talk to any flipper doing this, the way they make money is on the buy. The
100%.
work is going to be the work, and if anything, the work's going to go up. It's not going to go down. Where you're going to make money on is the buy. And a lot of that research is that you're going to do yourself. But again, what I've said many times before, surround yourself with a good team that understands your goals and can walk you through these values. Because if you're doing this for the first time, you don't know how much it costs to renovate. Wouldn't it be nice to have an agent and an inspector that you trusted enough that you could have a good conversation with to say, how much is this going to actually cost? And they say, I don't know. I've never really done a project and I don't rent the properties and, it's not going to help you. So,
yes. And I will say, even if an agent does give you numbers, I mean, you may want to validate them.
Trust but verify.
Trust but verify. Sometimes I get frustrated when my clients don't believe me because I'm like, this is what I do all day. But I totally understand it because I've talked to some clients where they're like, oh yeah, we went to this place and he said it's only going to cost $70,000 to get it up. And then we go there and I'm like, $70,000 per unit? Or like, cause this place needs everything. And they're like, no, the whole place. I'm like, this is why it's good to verify, but maybe bringing in a contractor. And a lot of them will be willing to come in and give you a rough idea. They might not give you a detailed quote, but they'll be like, look, it's going to cost you $100,000 a door to get this done. So yeah, that is major league important. The other item is for this, depending on how far you're going with the rehab, if it's more than just like, let's say paint, coat, and some cupboards, if you're intending to add units, that's another thing that you really want to make sure you're confident on before you get into the property. Zoning, actually, I'm coming to find everywhere is quite intense. Like really, whether in the States, you're in Canada, zoning is very intense. So you want to make sure when you're buying the property that you have, okay, so you want to put in a basement apartment, you got to double check, triple check with the city, whoever is the governing body for that you actually can. Because I've seen people get them and we thought they could do 3 units and a backyard suite because their neighbor has one. that means nothing. He could have done it illegally. He could have done it 30 years ago and got grandfathered in. You got to make sure that today you can actually do what you want to do with that property before you buy. You do that during your due diligence. And this is often why rental properties have longer due diligence periods, because they have to get confirmation that they have a certain amount of units. Totally. And that can take a few weeks. And then they want to get confirmation that they can do what they want to do. That can sometimes take months.
Yeah, which is challenging right now in this market where the seller's going to say, well, I could go with your offer that has a 3-week due diligence period, or I can go with this offer here that has a 1-week due diligence period. So in a competitive market, it can be riskier to try to shorten up your timelines while doing all this and covering yourself. So you need to build in some cushion to your exit strategy of, okay, if all things go poorly, am I still going to be able to come out the other side of this thing?
Exactly. And then I think, being realistic on your numbers, because I think a lot of times I go into these places with guys that are getting started out and like, oh, I can rent this for $4,000 a month. And I'm like, there is one unit in the neighborhood that is rented for $4,000 a month and it's over rented, and you don't want to bank on that. And if the market were to pull back at all, where are you going to be with this place?
Yeah.
Right. And to be honest with you, even if you get it there, sometimes the bank's not going to accept that. They're going to do a market rent themselves and say, we don't think that's actually the right rent. Unless you have a couple of years showing that you have that, they're not going to support that on their valuation on the back end.
I think maybe if we take just a tiny little step backwards for a second, the whole objective of this model, when done successfully, is that you put money into a property, and when you're finished, by way of a refinance, which Neal is going to explain, you get all of your money back that you put in, and then maybe a little bit extra.
And you get to keep the property.
And you get to keep the property. So this is why we're talking about what is the end goal and what is the exit strategy and why are these numbers so important. It's because you're taking a leap of faith that if you put in, say, $20,000 for the down payment and $60,000 for renovation, and you're tying up $80,000, that at the end of this, you're going to get every dollar of that back, and hopefully then some, still own the property. And the reason you want that is because then you can take that same money and do it again. Right. Exactly. So that's how this differs from just buying a home and taking pride in your home and sprucing it up and enjoying it and making it better. That's what people do over here. And they're investing in real estate, but in a very small scale. The Brrrr method is for people who the whole point is to do this once purely so then you can do it multiple times. And if you can't get the lift, which is a term you'll hear all the time, then you can't get your money back out, which means you cannot do it again.
Exactly. Yes. I kind of skipped over that because I always just, again, assume everyone's heard the Brrrr method, and they understand the main concept. But again, I guess this is why we're explaining it. So 100% to what Chandler said. And when he says get your money back out, that is on a refinance. So when you get your final mortgage based on its end value, that money, subtract everything you spent, you should be able to pull your money out. So this is, again, with that, the basic math, it's basically very basic math that you're doing running into this. And you should be able, like you said, is have big buffers. Right. So if you're buying for $300, you're expecting to spend $70. Say you're going to spend $100, if not a little bit more, and your end value, you're hoping that end value comes out a bit higher than what you need it to be to get your money back. Now, when I started, I always wanted it to be that when I was buying it, it's 50% of my end value with even my renovation. And that was because the market wasn't that hot. You could pull that off. There were places that had the opportunity to do that. And what that meant is a lot of times I was pulling out 20% of the end game value on top of my down payment, which allows you to pull forward very fast. Realistically, that's not as much the case anymore. So it's more likely to come out around 70 to 75%.
So give us some hypothetical numbers.
So for example, if you bought a place for $100,000, you put in $100,000, so you're in the whole thing for $200,000. I would want the end number to be $400,000. So the end value, based on what you have all renovated and completed and rented, is now $400,000. And for number's sake, we'll say you can borrow 75% of that loan to value. The bank would then give you $300,000. So you'd pay off the whole 100 of the original mortgage with the home and your down payment, which the down payment would come back to you. The renovation, we'll assume you did in cash. So you get that $100,000 back. Then the other $100,000 would also come back. So now you'd have all your money plus $100,000, plus you'd own the property with $100,000 of equity.
Yeah, and I mean, that's a really beautiful, extremely successful case.
Yes.
On something that might be a bit more conservative. If you perhaps purchased a property for $200,000
Yeah.
Right? You put $60,000 into it, so you effectively owe $260,000, but at the end it's worth $400,000, and you refinance at 75% loan to value, even though you might get 80% loan to value. That's $300 to $320K, which means you're getting all your money back out that you put in, plus whatever the difference is. Yeah, $40K. So, and you own the property. So it's like, all right, I spent $60,000 out of my pocket plus my down payment, so call it $75,000. I've got all of that back. Plus, I've got this nice little $40,000 extra. Now I have $115,000 to do this again on the next property,
and a bit of rental income.
Yeah, exactly.
Hopefully, it cash flows it. So that's again going over the buy. That is the number. Like, one thing is just making sure that your buy is very strong, running your numbers, and not. I find some people are so keen to get in that they push the numbers to what they want them to be. It's like, well, my budget's coming at 150, but I'm not going to pull that all out. So I can just cut this out and cut this out, and it'll be down to 120. And if I saw that they had these on sale, so I get them for this, and they'll squeeze their rental budget down, and they'll try and make all the numbers like really, really good. And then they're like, well, I can probably get the appraiser up to here and get the rents up to here. That if you got to do that, I always say if you got to like force it to make it work, and you really got to squeeze the numbers, not a great one, especially not to get started on. Right, if you already own a bunch and you're just kind of adding it to your inventory, not a big deal. But if you're trying to get rolling, like that's not a good way to get started.
Yeah, totally. And you have to be kind of say, all right, what is my goal? Do I need to hit a home run on this? Or am I happy just getting my money back? And then if you get your money back, then you've effectively purchased that property for zero money down, which is in itself a pretty good, investment. So you have to be realistic about what your goals are and temper your expectations and have someone that you're consulting with that can guide you. I mean, I always tell people I'm very, I'm happy to take risks with my own money. When it's someone else's money, I'm a bit more risk averse, right? So I tell them a bit more conservative numbers. And if the market goes your way, like you can imagine people who bought investment properties either in 2019 or even in parts of 2020, like how well they would have done with this model just based on what happened in the market. People did not see that coming. So plan for the worst, and maybe that's just getting your money back with a little kicker, and moving on to the next one. And if something better happens, that's great. It's a win.
Exactly. And now what I'm typically looking for in these, obviously on top of the actual numbers, the type of buildings, I like stuff, and I think most people in this market are ones that are mismanaged and ill-maintained, assuming the price matches so. Right? You don't want to go in and buy a building that someone's already gone in and cleaned up a bunch and they got good solid tenants at market rents.
There's no lift there.
You're unable to make that lift because you can't necessarily increase the rents. You can't add value to the units. So you're kind of stuck at that value. You really want to find places where the rents are under market, assuming, again, that you're paying the price based on those current rents.
You got to avoid what's called the romance of the wreck, right? Where you see a wreck property and you get all these grand ideas about how nice you're going to make it, and it becomes a passion project. People overpay for the romance of the wreck. You have to be very pragmatic with this, and you can't, you want to find these properties that you can clearly see the path towards the end. Like you can visualize the goal. It is worth this now. It is going to be lifted to this here. And then what do I have to do to get it from there to there? Does that make sense? Will I get my money back and then some to move on to the next one?
And then within, again, at the end, we're going to spend a lot of time on this buy because, again, the rest of the stuff is fairly straightforward. This is where the importance is. I'd say there's two categories within these mismanaged properties. We see some that actually aren't in bad shape. They're just under rented because the person's had them forever and they just don't care. Like you could go in there and probably do nothing besides paint and increase all the rents by 10% or 15%. And then there's the others where it's like, no, this place needs full guts. Like it needs everything new. And that's a whole different game, but they both offer the same opportunity. And I was actually in one yesterday, the 6 unit, where they're just all under rented. They're all very under rented. And I was telling my clients, said, look, you guys come in here, you put down laminate, you paint the place, you can get all these rents up by $300-$400 a month.
You manage it.
You literally just manage the building. And by adding $400 a month in rent, that's like adding almost $75,000 a unit in value. So right off the hop, they're going to be able to pull forward. Now, they're not necessarily going to pull out a big lift out of it, but in about 18 months, they'll probably be able to pull out their original investment, maybe a little bit less, but they'll own the property and they'll have the equity within it. It'll cash flow, and it's a good step forward. Yeah,
and I think we're kind of using this interchangeably to speak about small single-family homes and larger multi-unit properties because, as I mentioned before, this is the same thing people have been doing for years at every level of the market. So, if it's a multi-unit or be it a small scale or a large multi-unit, a lot of the lift can be had by management and rent income stream. If it's a single family home, you're limited essentially to what you can do to that property, in which case the buy is also heavily reliant on, like you said, the comparable sales.
Yeah.
Right? Like what's going on in the area. And it's an old cliche of, pay for location and buy the worst home on the nice street and all that good stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and exactly. These two are very, so 4 or less units on average, they're looking on a comparable basis. Like your neighbor sold for this, yours is kind of worth this. After that, that's when rents and cap rates and things like that become very important.
Yeah.
It's almost easier in some ways though, because it's really math oriented and it's not complicated math. Once you build your spreadsheet, you can almost apply it to everything.
Yeah, we're going to do the ultimate guide to cap rates here soon on the podcast.
We'll get deeper into that. But again, on broad scale, basically you want to get places that you can increase those rents, but you're not paying a big dollar value for something that doesn't have the rents yet. And a lot of times, honestly, you can't because the appraisal just won't come in to justify paying for it, right? If it's only getting $500 a month, they're not going to give an appraisal that's so high. So you wouldn't be able to close that deal anyways. Another thing you always want to make sure you do when you're buying something bigger is get environmental on the purchase.
Also a future episode. We've had some interesting ones on that. Anyways, so that's the buy. There's still some more other stuff that we can get into, but again, we'll get into it here in the different next steps. So once you've completed the buy, now the next step is rehab or renovate. And this is where you're adding value. You're spending money, you're adding value, you're making them better. And this is, again, it's best that you have a good team around you. So not like your agent, your broker, but also contractors. Very important. Because if you just go out and hire the fanciest GC that you can find, they may have a great Instagram, but they're going to charge you $200K to renovate a unit, and then you're going to have no ability to make money on it. Yes, it might be beautiful, but there's going to be no lift left because they took the lift. Yeah.
So you need to be conscientious, and you need to find out, you need to GC. Especially getting started, you have to GC everything. You have to pick out each of your independent sub-trades. You got to price check, and you got to verify they're doing it.
It also might help if you know how to swing a hammer. I mean, my first couple properties, I was in there because my hourly rate was low enough that it made sense for me to be in there putting down laminate, doing trim, doing tile. I also, because I was, a bit skeptical, I wanted to know what was involved in all of the labor so that one day when I was paying for it, I understood what I was paying for. And I knew the trade-off. So, early on, I did a lot of that work myself, and it's where some people find their competitive advantage. If you are handy and you can do some of these things, that can help with those numbers. Because, when I give my clients these numbers, I would say, this is the Yellow Pages number, which some people are like, what are the Yellow Pages? But like, this is the retail price for these things. So if you can go out there and do some of this work yourself, you're going to better the retail price. So I'm going to give you the high-end number. You do it for less than that, that's more money in your pocket.
Exactly. I 100% agree with that because it's hard if you're not from that industry to understand what things cost, and people can easily pull the wool over your eyes, and you're like, wait a second, I've done that. It only takes 40 minutes. And why am I getting charged $1,800?
Yeah.
So learning cost is extremely important. I think the other thing to consider is when you're doing the renos, what actually impacts your ability to rent the unit and to get good rent dollars.
Yep.
Because some people are like, oh, I'm going to put gold plating on the outside of the building. And I'm like,
yeah.
Okay, well, I mean, I was like, as cool as that is, I was like, I want to see the gold building. I want to be a part of the gold building.
Yeah.
I'm not going to pay any extra rent to live in my unit because the outside's gold.
I have a couple like that where like sometimes, oh gosh, I wish I could do something else to the exterior, but it's not going to raise the rent, right? No. Like you have to be careful, like what you do for passion projects, and what you're actually doing running this as a business. Yeah,
you got to consider what's going to get the big ones. Like right off the hop, the thing that I always push everyone onto is bathrooms. If there's a female renter coming in there, they want to see a clean bathroom. Not to stereotype anything like that. Guys on average are kind of like, there's a hole in the ground, and then there's a spot for me to rinse off. Okay, sweet. I might only use one of those. So, but like a female renter is going to be very serious about that, and some males are too. But it's a really important item. People want to feel comfortable in their bathroom, and so if the second they're in there doing a showing and they're just like, "This is a disgusting bathroom," the huge turnoff right off the hop. Obviously, hard surface floors. I think that's old news now. Like almost everything is hard surface floor. Kitchens, I find, make a huge difference as well.
Of course. You can also do kitchens really economically. And this is where the experience starts to matter.
Yes.
Because maybe you don't need all new cabinets and boxes. Maybe you can get away with painting a new countertop and a backsplash. Like, you have to know your demographic for that particular area. If you do quartz countertop in an area where people don't know what quartz is, like, it's not going to affect the rent. right? Like, so you have to be
Is
mindful.
that a dig?
No, that's not a dig. But I love that is kind of, that was not intended to be a dig. Neal just has got a great deal on quartz.
Yeah.
But you need to kind of know who your target demographic is. You need to know what is a smart spend and what isn't. And you need to be mindful of what the pricing is for the stuff. It's also why, and again, coming back to the buy, what can you salvage from the existing property? That's always key. The last thing you want when you're doing this method is to get into things like windows and roofs and heating systems.
Siding.
Because not only are they expensive, but just like the gold plating on the outside will not get you more rent. The brand new roof shingles are not going to get you any return. Windows, tenants like them, but let's be honest, like they're not going to pay you more money because the windows are better. So if you can find a place where some of these big ticket items that aren't fancy but are really expensive are already done, that's a place where you can get good lift, because then you're going in minimal investment, cosmetic stuff, and just elevating the property that way.
Yeah.
Right.
And I mean, you don't need to go to an extreme. I actually went to the extreme. I took this exact thing to the extreme. I just never did any of the exteriors of my buildings. Like I just kind of kept them basic, and they look kind of shitty. And I look back and I'm like, you know what? Like I could probably squeeze a bit more rent out of these and get better tenants if they looked a little cleaner. And now I'm going back and fixing a lot of my exteriors. But paint's your friend. Paint is your friend.
Also, exteriors I find don't matter a whole lot with rent, but they can matter with quality. Appraisal and quality. Because, you know, again, this gets back to cap rates a little bit, but your rents are going to be what the rents are. But when you're talking to your appraiser about pushing the value, it helps if your home looks nice from the outside, right? You can say, well, listen, this is a nicer building. It deserves a lower cap rate.
That front picture on the appraisal report.
Totally, right? Like it does help, but that's not going to change your cash flow month to month.
No.
But it could impact your refinance down the road. Exactly.
That's why I say be economic with the outside. I'm doing a lot of siding painting.
Yeah,
I find that's a great way to do it. It's like, siding $40,000. I can get a painting for $7,000. Like, you know what I mean? $5,000. But yeah, so it's just being smart about what you spend the money on, and you can reuse a lot of things. Again, I'm going to say it again. Paint is your friend. Like there is a lot of stuff you can paint to make look really good.
Highest and best return.
Yeah, easily, all day.
And if you're doing stuff yourself, everyone can paint a little bit, right?
Yeah. So you get the rehab done. You're all finished up your renovation. You're super happy with it. Now you got to get it rented out. Look around your neighborhood. See what things are renting for. I always say go after top rents.
Yeah.
Right off the hop. My big reason is once you're done the reno, that's the nicest that unit's going to be until you reno it again. So get somebody, like get the top rent in there, because once you get someone in there and you're like, I'll raise it next year, I'll get the next person I'll raise it on. You're going to go do that, and this person's going to move out, and there's going to be all sorts of nicks and dings, and some cabinets are going to be off, and things are going to look a little bit mucky, and you're like, crap, I can't get a top rent anymore.
Also, like, know what's going on in the rental market at the time. Like, right now, there is a shortage of housing. The vacancy rate is super, super low, so you might be able to start marketing the property before you're even done.
Yeah.
Right? Like, there's that shortage of inventory here right now, and that also means you can put a test price out there.
Yes.
Right? Like, say you know that you're 60 days out, but maybe 70. So realistically, you're 3 rental months away from occupancy.
Yes.
Right? Why not put your rent out there at $1,800?
Yeah.
Right? You run that for 30 days. If no one snatches it up, which they probably will because of the market, then you could still lower it to $1,600 and have 60 days just to rent it. But to Neal's point, like that unit is as nice as it's ever going to look.
Yeah.
So why not capture that with typically a better tenant who's going to care for it.
Go for gusto at that time.
Yeah.
And at the same note, get the appraiser in around that same time, usually before someone moves in, assuming it actually looks pretty nice.
Yeah.
Because there's a good chance it could get worse as time goes on. So you'll want to get the appraiser in early. Also, it's good to get the appraiser in a bit early because you'll come to find out that those steps take time. So you don't want to wait until, okay, I've gotten everything done. It's fully rented. It's sitting there. Mm-hmm. Now I'm going to start the process of refinancing and getting the appraisal and all those other items. Mm-hmm. So in this step here, even though refinance is technically the next step, you actually want to be starting it like near end rehab.
Because you also want your money back ASAP.
Exactly.
Right? Like you're at this point, you're hemorrhaging money paying for all these things. And whether you've got that on a line of credit, whether you've got that on a purchase plus improvement mortgage, which is maybe something that we can talk about here just really quick. When you buy a property for $200,000, you can get $40,000 worth of quotes, for example, and take that to your bank and say, I'm buying it for $200,000, but I also want $40,000 to renovate it. Because you need to finance these repairs some way, be it purchase plus improvements, or you can go and take a separate line of credit, or you have to cash flow it.
Yeah.
So either way, you're going to want that money back as soon as possible. So the earlier you can get it turned over,
the better.
And this is also one of the things I learned when I was trying all these things myself and getting myself familiar with, what is involved in laying flooring and all this stuff is my time is also worth a lot. Like if it takes me 3 months to complete the project, whereas I could have outsourced it and it been done in 1 month, that's 2 extra months of rent, right? Like, so you learn these things through doing, but you need to be mindful of your time because you want to get it refinanced quickly so you can capture that equity, pay yourself back, get some extra lift, and then hopefully buy another one.
Exactly. Regarding the renting, we'll go more into, we'll probably end up doing a thing on just like getting good tenants, the process. I think we kind of talked about it before a little bit as well.
It's everything we touch on, really.
Yeah.
Like it's about renting.
Yeah. So, but I mean, at the end of the day, I think the biggest one for me is, like I said, is go after top rents. Also, if you have a fairly big multi-unit, even not necessarily fairly big, but it goes a long ways, like $50 a month. If you do it on 5 or 6 units, you might be surprised how much it bumps your end value.
Cap rate episode coming up soon.
Exactly.
It's going to be the...
Again, cap rate episode will be good. So anyways, you get it rented out, and then we kind of already transitioned, but refinancing, again, that's something you want to start, I'd say, earlier than actually having the property rented. A lot of times, a bank will give you an LOI, a letter of interest, saying that a letter of intent that they'll fund you at a certain percentage, assuming your appraisal comes back good and you meet those rents, right? So like you can already kind of know your numbers before you're even done. You can know your numbers on the buy, actually. You can get, when you purchase, you can get an as complete appraisal done at the same time. I frequently do this, and that allows me to finance my construction money. So I'm buying, saying I'm buying at $200,000. I already have an appraisal telling me that if I do what I said I'm going to do and rent it for what I said I'm going to rent it, it's worth $400,000. The bank will be like, okay, we will finance your purchase, plus we'll finance your renovation.
Yeah, and that's essentially how that purchase plus improvements method works. Like the appraiser goes there and says, okay, show me what you're spending this 40 grand on.
Yeah.
Right. And then they assess, okay, well, when you do that, the home's going to be worth this, and they feel good about it. It gets more important when you're doing larger scale projects because it's big time money and you kind of want it up front so you can finance these things.
Yeah.
So you can pay for these things. Sorry.
Exactly. Purchase plus is kind of your basic getting started one. And then as you get more into the bigger ones and more cost based, it doesn't necessarily have to be a bigger project though. They will do smaller projects. They can do a lot of financing on your renovation, and they can do it in draws. So they can give you sections as you go along. So you're not having to hurt. If it's going to take you more than 4 or 5 months to get it done, you don't have to wait until you've done everything to get the money. They will give you your sections along the way.
Yeah, that's huge.
And that is huge. And that was major for me. That was like an enormous thing. And most people ask me, like, how are you buying these buildings and doing all the renovations? And I'm like, look, I'm buying it knowing the end value, and the bank's giving me the money to do the renovation. So I'm not really feeling too much out of pocket. They might want to see 20% of renovation done by me. So every draw, they might give me $20,000. I got to spend $5,000.
Yeah.
Right? So it's not so bad, and it allows me to keep going, and it makes it a lot more feasible for you, because a lot of people see, okay, crap, I got to put down 25 or 20% on this house, which is 80 grand. Then I got to spend another 80 grand. I don't have 160. I have 100.
Yeah.
Right?
Or even if they're starting off with 5% down, they're like, I got to put 15 down, 7 grand close. That's 22. And you're telling me it needs 40 grand worth. I don't have 60.
Yeah.
Right. So these programs, again, talk to a good mortgage professional, understand your options from your realtor, your whole team. People have done this before. You can do it too, but you need the right advice. So you've bought the home, you've rehabbed it, you've got it rented, and you've refinanced it because you had the appraiser come in and say, this is what it's worth now, or this is what we knew it was going to be worth when you completed it.
Yep.
What happens now?
So now you get your cash. That's a fun time.
It's a good day.
You can either, you go to your lawyer's office and you pick up a refinance and you see your down payment, potentially your renovation money, and potentially even more sitting there. It's a very exciting time. Yeah,
it's also like it's relief as much as it is inside. It's relief that you got through it. You got your money back. So, if you scrimped and saved every dollar you had and it was $80,000 or $120,000, or maybe it was only $22,000 of your money and then $40,000 of someone else's or the bank's, to see this line item that says, hey, just so you know, that renovation thing is paid off. The existing mortgage is paying off. We're putting this new one on there. And here's the simple net out of this check that we're going to cut to you right now.
It represents so much too. It's like, look, I'm proud that I went through the whole process. I'm rented. The project's done. Like it represents that the accumulation of this entire process, which a lot of times will take at least 6 months, if not a year, a ton of hard work, sweat, tears, stress. It's completed. So it's an exciting time. On top of the money, you're just like this huge satisfaction of like, I got this done.
Well, as you and I talked about in an early episode, like we like the creative aspect of this. Yeah. And this is like when you finish a puzzle and you put that last piece in, it's like it's done. Yeah. It's working the way it should work. Yeah. Right? Because you've bought something that's underperforming in one way or the other, and now you've brought it back to life.
Exactly.
Right? And and you've housed people there. And yes, there's always this thing about, well, you've unhoused some people to serve a different market.
Yeah.
But it's nice when you are able to give people keys to their new place and they're pumped to be there.
Yeah.
Right? It's a lovely thing.
Exactly.
And it's tax-free.
Yeah. So now you have your refinance check. You book a one-way ticket to Vegas.
Yeah.
You go to the first roulette table and you slap the whole thing on black.
Yeah.
Once you've doubled that up, you book another one-way ticket back to your hometown.
And you buy two.
And you buy two. No. But in all seriousness, repeat. That's the last star. It's repeat. That's why the whole process is trying to be expedited, fast, smart about it. And you're likely doing this because you want more. But on that same note, I see this as a mistake that a lot of people make. The second they get that check, they're just all over me. Like there's 3 duplexes left on market. And like, we got to see all 3 of them. And I'm like, the reason they've all been on there for 180 days is because they're absolute hot garbage. Mm-hmm. And like, no. Like I gotta get, like, and they're just so.
Well, what is the repeat? The repeat is to start back at the buy, and we talk about how important that is. None of this works if you did not get a good deal to begin with.
Yes.
In fact, the opposite problem happens. All your money is stuck in the property that you can't get back out. So this is why I tell people all the time, exit strategy, exit strategy.
Yes.
Tell me, like, if you're going to bring a property to me, because people bring properties to us, what do you think of this? I say, just tell me the numbers of how you're going to get all of your money back so that you can do it again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So again, when you go to the repeat, just think about everything we talked about in the buy. Take your time, go through all your numbers, work with your team. Don't rush into something just because you have a bunch of cash burning a hole in your pocket. But you know what? I also say do celebrate. Like whatever your little thing is, get yourself a little something, right? Like if you want to get yourself something that was whatever, it depends how big it is. But if you want to go for a big fancy meal, do
celebrate
that.
The wins, man. You got to
maybe
celebrate
go for a
the
trip.
Wins.
I was bad for doing that. I never celebrate the wins, and you start to lose the excitement and flavor. It just becomes part of the process. But take a little bit off and be like, this is a reward for my hard work, and get yourself something.
Yeah. Treat yourself.
Treat yourself. So,
all right. And then you repeat.
Yeah.
So rewind this back, start it again, do it again.
Yeah. So put our podcast on repeat constantly.
Get fired up. Watch it looking in the mirror, pumping yourself up.
Exactly. Thanks for listening. Check out our other stuff. Please let us know if you have any questions or things you'd like us to cover.
Yeah. Get engaged.
Yeah.
That's good. Let us know.
Yell at us on TikTok.
I love that. All right. I got to roll. I got to sort out this issue that happened at a pre-close. So applause me out of here, Tanner.